So without further ado, I'm going to be taking this forward because, we've got only about, 30 minutes for this. It's a very exciting topic. I think it follows very, very nicely from the panel discussion that we just had. We've set the context about the value, the importance of observability, what that looks like in practice. How do you get started initially? In this session, we want to pick up how you can introduce OpenTelemetry, which is an open standard around observability in your organization in 3 steps. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Adriana, who's going to be guiding us, enlightening us through this session. Handing it over to you, Adriana.
Awesome, thanks. Happy Leap Day, everyone. And welcome to introducing OpenTelemetry to your organization in 3 steps. I'm super stoked to be here today. Now, before we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about me. My name's Adriana Villela, and I'm a CNCF ambassador. I'm a HashiCorp ambassador, blogger, podcaster. I'm a developer advocate in the observability space by day, and I spend a chunk of my time working in OpenTelemetry. And by night, I climb walls at my local climbing gym. I also have a love for capybaras. Now, while sadly I won't be talking about rock climbing today, I will be talking about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is OpenTelemetry. So picture this. This is the scene. So you're sold on observability with OpenTelemetry or OTel, which is amazing, and you're excited to bring it into your organization. Now, maybe there might even be some teams already using OpenTelemetry in your org, but they're each doing their own thing as they do, right? And you need an overall strategy around rolling out OpenTelemetry so you don't end up with a bunch of little kingdoms doing their own thing, but you don't know how or where to get started. Sound familiar? So you might be wondering, how do you go about it? And today I will share 3 steps to get you going. So step 1, communicate. Folks in your organization won't know that you want to use OpenTelemetry unless you tell them. Classic thing, right? In an org, left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And this is where a little advocacy goes a long way. So rolling out OpenTelemetry across an entire organization is a huge initiative. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. By declaring that OpenTelemetry is happening, people in your organization know that it's serious, especially when the directive comes from leadership. And, make the announcement through a combination of Slack, Teams, whatever collaboration tool tickles your fancy that your org uses. And you know what? Let's over communicate and also schlep it into a town hall, right? Now, that's great, but people just don't want to be told what to do because, as we all know, transformation fatigue or initiative fatigue is real. So you must explain what OpenTelemetry is. And as a little sidebar, OpenTelemetry is a CNCF project. It is a vendor-neutral observability framework that lets you ingest, transform, and export your data to basically whatever system you would like to then analyze your data. So if you want people to follow you down this path of OpenTelemetry, they need to know what they're getting into. You need to build up the hype. And the thing I love about OpenTelemetry that gets me hyped is because it's vendor neutral. It means that, if you decide you want to switch over to a different vendor at a later point in time, you can do that relatively easy because all you have to do is change a configuration and point it to a different backend, which is awesome. And the other thing to point out is that most of the major observability vendors out there now support OpenTelemetry. So there's no longer a debate of like, oh, is this thing actually a thing? I can assure you that OpenTelemetry is a thing and it does have industry backing. So explaining what OpenTelemetry is and its benefits is extremely useful in your organization. So benefits include no vendor lock-in. As I said, if you become unhappy with your observability vendor, it's easy to switch to a different vendor without re-instrumenting your code. Hurrah! Vendor neutrality. Because OpenTelemetry is vendor neutral, you can easily send telemetry data to multiple observability backends simultaneously. Yes, simultaneously. So this is a great opportunity to do a side-by-side comparison of observability vendors to see what suits your needs. OpenTelemetry is active. As I said, it is part of the CNCF. It is the second most active project of the CNCF behind Kubernetes. That is no small feat to achieve. OpenTelemetry is a standardized framework, as I said, backed by most major observability vendors, and it is here to stay. It allows you to correlate 3 key telemetry signals, traces, metrics, and logs, which its predecessors did not enable. And by the way, I saw a question on is OpenTelemetry like Prometheus metrics? So OpenTelemetry allows you to emit metrics, and also OpenTelemetry plays nice with Prometheus, so it allows you to ingest Prometheus metrics and then do what have you with those metrics. And then finally, standardization. So OpenTelemetry is a standardized framework, as I said, backed by most major observability vendors. It is here to stay. It allows you to correlate all 3 key telemetry signals, as I said, traces, metrics, and logs. Now, you'll also want to put out a call to folks who are interested in OpenTelemetry and recruit them to be champions internally, and consider forming an observability practices team with them. It can serve as an advocacy team, focusing on the benefits of OTel, creating practices around its implementation and rollout, and becoming subject matter experts in OpenTelemetry. I actually did this at a previous role of mine. I was hired to run an observability team, and basically the mandate of our team was to spread observability practices throughout the organization, and that included OpenTelemetry practices, and really inform and help people understand the benefits of OpenTelemetry, but also help them in terms of what they needed to do to get started. So that's of thing is really, really important. And it's not just a matter of like, our team was not isolated. We had to work with engineers on application teams who were enthusiastic. So including engineers who can dig into OpenTelemetry to produce a set of practices within the organization and become the go-to folks for any OTel related question. Recruiting a mixture of individual contributors and managers, and they don't all have to be OpenTelemetry experts from the get-go. I mean, who is, right? I think we're starting to see a lot more of that now, but definitely not in the beginning. But even if like, you know, you don't have any OTel experts in your organization initially, they can grow into that. I mean, we're engineers, we can do this stuff. What's important is that we believe in it and we help to roll it out. That's really the key. And the more people believe in what you're doing, the more it's going to start to catch on. And then finally, create an OTel rollout plan with milestones and dates for reaching them to demonstrate your commitment to the project, because just saying, hey, we're going to do this OTel thing doesn't really sink in. People need deadlines. They need to know that it's real, and having milestones definitely helps to cement that. So make sure your timelines are realistic by getting input from your engineers and managers, and have them work with your observability practices team to put a plan in place and then communicate the plan. Now, during planning, you might ask your engineers things like, what are the critical path transactions in the system? What information is most important to you for troubleshooting an issue? And how can we help you adopt OpenTelemetry, right? We are not going to leave you in the dark trying to figure this stuff out by yourself. That would suck for everybody. All right, step 2. Do your homework. You need to understand your system's landscape to put your plan together accurately. Of course, there's no such thing as a perfect plan, so keep that in mind. Plans change. As we learn things, things pivot, and we have to be okay with being flexible as well. So remember that. So your application code probably comprises multiple services. So we need to identify each service and then dig in. So for each service, find out, basically take inventory of the language that it's written in, so you can determine what OTel instrumentation library or libraries your dev team needs to use. If you've got code written in Java, you will want to instrument your OTel code with the Java API and SDK. And also take an inventory of any third-party frameworks and libraries that you're using, since OTel auto instrumentation is available for many popular libraries and frameworks. For example, if you use Python, Flask is auto-instrumented. If you use Java, Java Hibernate is auto-instrumented. And finally, identify your homegrown frameworks and libraries, and I will talk a little bit more about that later. So next, you want to dig in a little bit deeper to identify your most critical high-value transactions. So you'll want to instrument them first because, according to OTel co-founder and my fellow colleague Ted Young, it ensures that complete traces are being created so you can start to investigate important issues early without having to wait for the entire organization to complete their migration. This is very, very key. By doing so, you are essentially putting yourself in a position where you can actually start troubleshooting meaningful things that are real pain points to you or can be potential pain points relatively quickly. You don't have to boil the ocean to be able to get started with OTel. Next, you'll also want to find out if any code has already been instrumented, and if so, what instrumentation frameworks are being used. So you want to find out if you're using stuff like OpenCensus or OpenTracing, or maybe something else, wrote your own thing, or there's a vendor-specific library somewhere. Now, OpenTelemetry is backward compatible with OpenTracing and OpenCensus, so you won't need to make any major code changes initially, which is great because I think people get really stressed out when they're like, oh my God, I invested so much into X framework. What am I going to do, right? Now, that being said, you do want to plan to eventually migrate over to OpenTelemetry to take advantage of all that it offers. So, for example, OpenCensus and OpenTracing don't support logs and metrics, or the integration between traces, metrics, and logs. So if you're using any homegrown libraries or frameworks, you need to be prepared to re-instrument your application using OpenTelemetry. The other thing too is, because OpenTracing and OpenCensus aren't being worked on anymore, it basically means that, like, if you're relying on that, forever, it's a bit of a problem, because if there are any security issues that come up, that is potentially compromising for your organization. So upgrading to OpenTelemetry eventually will ensure that you have most of the, that you have like all the up-to-date security concerns addressed, hopefully. All right, now, along with application tracing data, you'll want to send your metrics data to an observability backend for a nice holistic system view. And this means that you need to identify your metric sources. Is it Kubernetes, Kafka, Docker, Nomad, virtual machines? Also identify what kinds of application metrics that you want to capture. All right, step 3, instrument. So you're now ready to start instrumenting with OpenTelemetry, and here are some of the recommended instrumentation practices to help teams get started. If your system is experiencing frequent reliability issues, this is often a sign that you need better observability, and therefore you might need to delay some planned features to instrument your code or reevaluate what's already been instrumented. And actually, I want to just go back to stay on this a little bit longer. I think it's very easy for organizations to just kind of push past the, well, we're always on fire, but we need to get those features out. But at the end of the day, you need to think about the fact that if your house is on fire and you're trying to build like an extra bedroom, that is completely nonsensical. So why would we do the same thing with software? Like, if you're in a situation where you're constantly like calling on your engineers in the middle of the night because there's some incident or other, like, that is freaking stressful. And I think this is a time to say, whoa, let's take a look at things, because like, if your thing is breaking all the time, you can add all the features in the world. It's going to drive your customers away if it's constantly broken. So all right, on to the next point. So if your language supports auto instrumentation, take advantage of it. This is a pretty low barrier to entry to OpenTelemetry, And auto instrumentation basically means that you are allowing OpenTelemetry to instrument your code without you actually having to touch your code. Usually that's done through like these wrappers around your services that are available through certain languages. So auto instrumentation is currently available for Java, .NET, Python, JavaScript, PHP, and Go. Now, auto instrumentation is wonderful, and when you first get it working, you're like, whoa, magic! Super cool. But that being said, it is possible to over-instrument, which means that you can end up with so much crap that it becomes hard to troubleshoot issues, and you're like, what am I even looking at? And this can happen from auto instrumentation. So once you start auto instrumenting your code, it's good to take a step back and see, okay, see if the libraries being auto instrumented are the ones that you need to collect instrumentation from. Now, fortunately, there is a way to limit what gets auto instrumented. Like languages like Java and Python have configuration that allows you to limit these sorts of things. So that's always good. Now, the other thing to mention is that just as test-driven development, or TDD, is about writing tests alongside your application code, we have observability-driven development, or ODD, which is the act of adding instrumentation as you write your application code. Now, by instrumenting as you code, you know exactly what to instrument because the code is fresh in your mind. And it also prevents new technical debt related to observability from coming into play, because you won't have to go back and instrument your code later, which is always a good thing. Now, on that note, this is a very important one. Make sure that your application teams are instrumenting their own code. If you do anything other than the application teams instrumenting your own code, you really are putting yourself in a bad spot. You should not rely on an external team to instrument someone else's code, because the application developers know their code best. They work with it on a daily basis. They know what to look for, when to troubleshoot. So then when they're going about instrumenting their code, they're like, hey, maybe I should add some instrumentation here because it would allow future me to troubleshoot this issue. It's so tempting to get a third party to instrument your application code when you're in a time crunch, you know, like your house is on fire, but you're not doing anyone any favors, because you're just going to get a bunch of people who have no freaking clues to what your code is doing, just blindly putting instrumentation there and praying that it's the thing that you need it to do. So it's not going to end well. I assure you, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. I have many t-shirts. Now, I will leave you with this clip from Liz Fong Jones, who sums it up perfectly. And I think, do I need to share my audio to do this? I think I do, right?
Yeah, I think it would be, yes.
Remind me how to do that. I should have done that before.
I think we just quickly stop sharing, and then when you, at the point of sharing, I think there's a little checkbox at the bottom that says share audio.
Oh yeah, okay. Give me 1 sec. Bear with me.
All right.
Oh yeah, share sound. All right, here we go. Yeah, I've used this clip many times because it's so great.
You're a full grown-up software engineer. Write your own damn tests, right? Like, so write your own damn comments, write your own damn observability annotations, right? Like, this is what will help you understand your code later. Someone else writing it for you achieves like very little of the value.
So there you go. It's not just me saying it. Liz Fong Jones is saying it. So you know, this is really great advice, and it will help you in the future. Now, although you can send your telemetry data directly from your instrumented code to your observability backend, another thing that you should do when you're instrumenting your code is to try to at least use one OpenTelemetry collector, probably more realistically speaking, but let's get into the habit of using OTel collectors. On the most part, they are the preferred way of sending your telemetry data to your backend. The collector basically acts as a central point for collecting and processing data from multiple data sources at once, and it can do some transformations of your data. It can add and remove attributes. It can do things like data masking. It can do some batching so that you're not bombarding your backends with tons of data all at once. And then, as I said, it ultimately exports data to your preferred observability backend for analysis, in some cases, multiple backends. And as I said, if you decide to change your observability backend later, then you can send the data simultaneously to multiple backends that you might be evaluating, and then just decide what you like best by just updating a YAML file on your collector config, and away you go. So once you've selected an observability backend, then, like I said, just change the YAML file to point to that backend, and boom. All right. Now, so that's basically it in a nutshell. We know that rolling out OpenTelemetry in your organization is not a trivial task, but having guidance for getting started goes a really long way. It's important to communicate, to do your homework, and to follow instrumentation practices. And if you get stuck, you've got an entire OpenTelemetry community that is willing to help. CNCF Slack is honestly such a friendly spot to hit people up for OpenTelemetry questions. Feel free to hit me up on CNCF Slack as well. I'm actually one of the co-chairs of the OpenTelemetry end user working group, and we love to hear end user stories of folks using OpenTelemetry in real life. And one of the things that we do as well is connect practitioners with other practitioners. We have a Slack channel where we have of OTel practitioners, and oftentimes they post questions of like, hey, does anyone have any experience doing blah? And one of the things we get to do is connect them with other folks in the channel who may have done that, or we can point them to whatever channel in the OTel CNCF Slack where folks might be able to answer their questions. So happy to help. And I'd also like to leave you with some handy resources. I've written a number of OTel related blog posts over the years, starting with me being a total OTel noob. I also invite you to check out the videos of the OTel end user working group. I've posted the link on here. And we host a number of monthly events as well. So we have OTel Q&A where folks basically we do interviews with actual practitioners of OTel about how they use OTel in their organizations, and they provide feedback also on OpenTelemetry. We like to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then we also have OTel in Practice, which is basically like a monthly meetup where someone presents an interesting OTel related topic of cool stuff that they've figured out that they want to share with the world. We just had one a couple of weeks ago with Paige Cruz, and that all these interviews, all these presentations are up on the OTel YouTube channel. And then finally, check out the article version of this talk, which I published in the News Stack last year. And in case you were wondering, all of the images in this deck were generated by AI because, well, I can't draw. I am one heck of a prompt engineer. So thank you to our evil AI overlord, Bing AI, powered by DALL-E 3. You drew us some wonderful capybaras. And also be sure to check out my podcast. I have a podcast called Geeking Out with Adriana Villela. You can hear more conversations with fellow tech geeks and geek out on cool tech topics. And I've had some awesome guests like Kelsey Hightower and Charity Majors in the past. So scan the QR code, find it on your various podcasting platforms and on YouTube. This QR code will take you to all the links. And finally, I would absolutely love to connect with y'all. So reach out if you have any questions or want to talk about any of the topics that I've covered. And also, before I sign off, whenever I do a blog post or a talk, I like to wrap up with a photo of my rats because I am a rat person as well as a Cappy person. So these are my rats. I have Mookie, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Katie. Yeah, so thank you so much for hanging out. And until next time, peace, love, and code.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adriana. That was very good. We've got a couple of questions from the audience as well. So I think we've got about 5 minutes to do that. I'm going to open up a poll just to see where you stand right now in your OpenTelemetry journey. Are you already adopting it? Are you already implementing it? Are you considering to do that? So I've just launched a poll, so feel free to do that while we take the discussion a little bit forward. Adriana, first question, obviously, for me, the biggest challenge sometimes can be who owns that observability strategy, especially from the time of its sort of inception within the organization, sort of that champion, the designated champion initially, all the way to sort of once you've started implementing it, strategizing it, who owns that strategy, who owns that plan. So within our organization, obviously, I've got that role of a developer advocate. I've got that advocacy bent of mine towards that. My co-host Sonia, she was sort of the champion who brought in OpenTelemetry within our organization as a senior product manager, group product manager now. So who would you say sort of is in the best position to perhaps get things started, and then following that, who owns the observability strategy?
I think ultimately you need somebody that's high enough up in the chain that has influence. Now, I mean, to get started with OpenTelemetry, like it can come from anywhere, right? It can come from an individual contributor or from an executive. All you need is the hype to get somebody excited. But I think ultimately, in order to make this thing really happen, you need some sort of executive sponsorship. And then ultimately, you're going to need some sort of a team that's going to be in charge of making this happen, right? That it's going to essentially be, I think, to really do it properly, you're going to essentially need an observability practices team where like their primary role is never going to be, I will instrument your code for you, because as I said, that is a terrible, terrible idea. But somebody who, it's a team of folks who understand observability, understand OpenTelemetry. They will help guide you through the practices and standards and really help your teams, support your teams in rolling out OpenTelemetry throughout your organization.
Great. Thank you for that. There is a question. So in the Q&A section, I think Sachin has asked a couple of questions around, materials about how to get started. I think you've shared some resources, and Sachin will reach out to you afterwards with some of the other resources that we will collect. So all the resources from this entire conference will be available. So obviously, Adriana specifically has shared some resources, but also from the other sessions, you might be able to get some of these step-by-step implementation guides that you're looking forward to. So to answer your question, Sachin, we'll send something over to you for sure. There is a question from Ruchir here, which is Adriana, in your experience, what are the typical incentives you have seen the champions respond to better? Is it mainly vendor neutrality, or is it also more observability value? Say, for example, better coverage from OTels. What is sort of that incentive that drives champions to drive that adoption conversation within an organization?
I think both those things end up being like the two biggest incentives. The vendor neutrality is a huge one because nobody likes to be locked into a vendor. I mean, it's so sucky when you're using whatever backend and you're like, oh my God, I hate them and they're so expensive, but like it's so expensive to move away from them, right? And I think OpenTelemetry helps to alleviate that a fair bit. And then just having that standard also is, and I think it plays into the vendor neutrality, having that standard. Again, knowing that this is like, it's not just some fly by night thing, because the problem is like if you had like, say, vendor-based frameworks, that's great. But then, or like a third-party framework, what if a vendor goes under, or what if like the third party decides to, like they're like, I'm done with this. Like, I don't want to maintain this thing anymore, right? And so having something that's like standardized, where you have that backing from like so many different vendors, where there's no way to not use OpenTelemetry for your observability practices, and then that further incentive of like, I need to have observability, especially like, I don't think you can escape from observability, but especially like, I think it can really help to surface major issues in products. Like there are certain products where you're like, how are you still standing? And I think if they had a little bit of observability, that would probably help them go a long way. So I would say like, just saving, like observability is such a core part of reliability, and that's something that we really need to understand. Actually, it's a core part of the whole SDLC, right? Someone instruments that code, but it's, and then we're going to see the benefits throughout the SDLC. But then ultimately, again, we need to think of the sanity of our poor SREs who are getting called in the middle of the night and making sure that we have properly instrumented code so they can go, oh, that's what's wrong. That goes a long way.
Got it. Thank you so much. I love the quote about there's no escaping observability. That is both ominous and drives home the point of its importance as well. So we're going to stop here. I think we're just at time right now. Adriana, this has been a fantastic session. Sachin has one final question about where do we follow the groups that you've been mentioning so far? I believe you're talking about the CNCF groups. I think there's a Slack available. So I don't know, Adriana, if you've got a link to share, maybe do that over here or in the lobby chat. We can take that after.
Yeah, let me post it in the lobby chat. I'll post a link to where you can directly join the CNCF Slack. And also post a link to the OTel end user working group as well, so that if you're an experienced practitioner or a newbie, you know, come join, ask us questions. We want to hear from you.
Perfect. We got the result of the polls as well. So it's interesting enough. Some folks are already using OpenTelemetry, but there are almost equal number of folks who have not explored this yet. So definitely something to keep in mind when, you know, throughout this discussion, throughout this conference, as well as afterwards. So, you know, we'll share some more data information about this. Thank you so much, Adriana. This has been a fantastic session. A great way to kick off our decision makers track. I believe people have got a good understanding of how they can adopt, or at least help adopt, observability, OpenTelemetry within their organization. So thank you so much, Adriana. This has been a fantastic session. We're going to head over for a little break. The breaks themselves are going to be your opportunity within the lobby chat to discuss, connect with each other. It is not a session of its own. And then we'll have 2 parallel sessions coming up in about 8 minutes time. The next one in the decision makers track is going to be about improving your telemetry data for better observability, sort of a really nice continuation from where we are leaving off over here. And then on the implementers track, we'll have getting started with OpenTelemetry and OTel demo to the rescue by Giuliano Costa. So with that, thank you, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Adriana. I'll see you at the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.
Bye.